I wanted to reach out to you. As you may know, I am often invited to speak at universities and churches and prisons, high schools, yoga studios, bookstores, and so on. And we even have regular monthly Buddhist boot camp discussion circles in which we get together and dig deeper into some of my monthly blogs and some of the concepts from the books to figure out how we can stop contributing to our own anguish. All of Buddhism can be encapsulated into the concept that pain is inevitable and suffering is optional. And so the first question is, why do we choose to suffer? And more often than not, it's because we're not aware that we are contributing to our own suffering, that we're part of the problem. We very quickly and easily blame other people. And so the reason we get together, the reason we have these discussions is to go, okay, what if I stop pointing the finger at other people and start looking at myself, start looking within and asking myself, am I the problem? And the benefit of that is I can't control other people, but I definitely have control over how I respond to other people, if that makes sense. So the reason I wanted to talk with you today is because I keep being asked to offer some words of inspiration during this whirlwind. And never before has it been so important for us to introduce a gap between impulse and response. We often talk about mindfulness, and what is mindfulness? As far as I know, as far as I'm inclined to define it, it's the pause between impulse and response. It's that gap, and we can increase that gap. And if you think about defining mindfulness, well, oftentimes to look for a definition, I look to the opposite, and the opposite of mindfulness would be mindlessness. So it's easy to see what mindlessness looks like and then think of its opposite. And mindfulness is that gap between impulse and response. And during that gap, during that pause, we can ask ourselves, what is the best response? Not reaction, but response. And you cross reference your behavior with your core values to make sure your response is in line with the kind of person you want to be. I don't know if I'm making any sense. This is definitely open for a Q&A. The thing that is really important for us to remember right now as people are freaking out and panicking is that people don't know. Well, we don't know how long this is going to last, and we don't know if this is just going to be a week or if this is going to be a year and a half. And I think I'm inclined to use the word funny, though it's not funny, haha. What's wonderfully insightful, I guess, is, in this all this uncertainty, is that we become aware that nothing is ever certain. Nothing ever was certain. So the only thing that we've lost during this time of transition is this illusion of security and this false sense of stability. That's the only thing that's been gone. It's not that we used to know and now we don't. We are now aware that we've never known. We never know what tomorrow is going to bring. We never know how long things are going to last. And so that's really the only, so we're getting more in touch with reality now than we've ever been. So I think it's perhaps a good thing. We're getting more in touch with the reality, and we're waking up from the illusion of control. And that can be scary for people, because especially control freaks, because they like feeling like they are under control, like they got it all figured out. They know what's going to happen tomorrow. They have plans for next month. They have reservations for next year. They know where life is going to take them. And then all of a sudden, the rug is swept out from under you. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a virus. It could be a divorce. It could be getting laid off work. It could be a number of things, a death in the family, your own death, the death of someone else. It could really, pull the rug out from under you. And we've often posted online, when something like this happens in life, just yell out plot twist and keep going. And so this is a major plot twist. And if we treat it as such, then it's not so I don't know, scary. I think that the fear, even in people who understand that every decision, thoughts, and action we have either stems from fear or love, and even people who've made a commitment to only make love based decisions in their lives are now finding themselves very fearful. And it's and that's jarring. You know what that means. You know what I mean. If you're so accustomed to leading life in one certain way, and then all of a sudden the rug is swept out from under you, and you find yourself feeling things that you haven't before, like you're scared, you're afraid, you're not sure what the future brings, and then, oh wait, but I never knew. Then there's a sort of release and acceptance, and dare I say surrender, in the most beautiful sense, to come what may, to allow, to trust, to witness. I often invite you guys to treat everything in life like as an experiment. It's just an experiment. Whether it be relationships, you take two people, you put them in the same room, and you're like, well, we'll see if this works or not. And if it works, great. And if it doesn't, you say, thank you for trying. Thank you for playing along with my experiment. Let's try something else. There's no reason to take so much of it so seriously. If when you move to a new town, it's an experiment. When you make new friends, when you go to a restaurant, you're like, it's just an experiment. I don't know what this experience is going to be like. And if you just approach it as just an experiment, then there's a lot less disappointment. There's a lot less weight to it. There's a lot less heaviness to so much of it. I hope I'm making sense. I've got notes here from a couple of people who are saying, one person said, I find this experience a major opportunity for growth for all people. And that is exactly how I think we can view this situation: is how can I grow from this? What can I learn about myself from this? And again, I want to offer this opportunity for many of us to have a conversation about this. It's these are interesting times, and I want to talk about that. I want to talk about how the words with which we describe our experience dictate our experience. So if you're using adjectives to describe what's happening right now as horrible and tragic, and I don't know what other words you can come up with that are just absolutely, you know, um, dramatized adjectives of the situation, and just use the word interesting and say, this is interesting, then it takes the negative weight off of it. It still honors what is happening, the people who are getting sick, the people who are dying. I'm not in any way nullifying the heaviness of that. And yet, it's all very interesting. It's very interesting that we are called upon by something practically invisible to stop being selfish, and people were getting very upset that Hollywood stars and whatnot and are getting coverage about being infected and whatnot. But what I love about that is that it sheds light on the fact that it doesn't matter how famous you are, it doesn't matter how much money you have, you're just as susceptible, if not more so, than other people. So this virus doesn't care about your race. It doesn't care about your income bracket. It treats us all equally, and maybe we can learn something from this virus. Maybe we can understand that this is a time for us to come together and be kind, not greedy, not hoard. People are running out of toilet paper, but it's for one reason and one reason only. It's because so many other people got way more than they needed. And I'd like to think of us, as our race, as a human race, as the roots of a big tree, and when it rains, which is nourishment for the tree. It's important for all the roots, the ones that are close to the surface and the ones that are deep down, the ones that are on the left, the ones that are on the right, to take as much water as they need, not more, and then let the rest seep through to the other roots so that everyone can get nourishment. Because if one side of the tree or one root says, no, I'm going to gather all the water right here myself, then it's going to kill the tree. Does that make sense? Like, we have to take the whole tree into consideration, because trying to save one root will not save the tree. It's important for the nutrients, and it's important for all the gifts that we receive to seep through and nourish all of us for the sake of all of us. Not try to save the few, because even then the whole tree is compromised. Not sure if this is making any sense. This is very different from my usual face-to-face Buddhist boot camp discussion circles that we have, where we're literally sitting in a circle of 50 to 100 people, and as we're sharing and talking, people tell me, oh yeah, that makes sense, or they ask a question and go, I didn't quite catch that. So with this being a live broadcast, I'm hoping you will utilize the option to type in notes. This is live on YouTube. Go to the Buddhist Bootcamp YouTube channel. There's a few people logged in, and I appreciate all the comments and saying hello from all the different parts of the world you're in, from Ireland to Wales, Pennsylvania, Kansas, Virginia Beach. Thank you guys for logging in. But interact with me, because it's very challenging for me to take what's going on up here and in here, and what I understand on a personal level and how I'm processing this information, and try to translate it, try to communicate it in a way that would resonate with someone else. And the way I can shift is by understanding what your experience is like. And then I can say, oh, then this is one instance where we can practice gratitude, as opposed to feeling entitled, which I think is one of the biggest epidemics, is this sense of entitlement, this, why is this happening to me? And my first question is, why wouldn't it? What makes you so special that it shouldn't? Things like that, to pause and think about how interconnected we all are, as opposed, like the roots of the tree, as opposed to, I'm special and this shouldn't be happening to me. So please keep the questions pouring in. You guys are dictating where this conversation goes and for how long it goes. I just wanted to offer some insight. There was one person who even gave me a hard time when I posted the other day that, I had to shift my own perspective on where this is going. Because at first I thought to myself, if it's my time to go, then it's my time to go. I'm not going to be afraid of this virus. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to do what I'm going to do. But it's not about me. When I learned more, found out more, as we are all finding out more and more as this progresses, it's that I may not know that I have been infected, and I'll go to the store or I'll go to a restaurant, and unknowingly I can spread it to someone else, and then they are then affected by my own negligence. So when I chose to stay home, it wasn't for my own being. We're all going to die at some point. Something's going to kill us. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not worried about this being it. I'm not worried about now being the time. I'm okay with that. I'm accepting of that. I've spent my entire life working to get to a place where I have no fear of what may come next. I'm actually quite excited about the mystery of it all. But I don't want to make that decision for someone else. You know what I mean? Like, it's not for me to decide, you need to be okay with getting sick and dying right now. Like, that's your decision to make, and for your journey. So I really want us to pause for a moment and take everyone else into consideration. Someone noted isolation is a problem for me. I've been watching Boundless Love Project videos to help me through this time. I think that's what's really interesting, is that we're all going to find something that's helping us get through it. I think the sheer awareness that we're not the only one, like, it's, your experience is not unique to you, in the sense that we're all going through this. That to me helps tremendously, because one of the challenges we have is that we think we're alone, that no one else understands what I'm going through. Well, that's not the case in this situation. Everyone understands what you're going through. Everyone is going through that whole whirlwind of, what level of panic is too much panic, and what level of carelessness is too careless, and where do I find the middle ground of honoring the situation and myself and my decisions, and also not going overboard in either direction. I don't know if that makes sense. So there are a few people here who are commenting on the importance. Eleanor said, thinking about the gap between thought and action, and I want to talk a little bit more about that gap in that pause. You know how companies, churches, organizations, websites for all those companies, you go and you read about them, and even on their website, they would say, this is our company, this is our vision, these are our core values. And so when that company is about to make a decision where to buy stuff from, where to import stuff from, who to sell to, and what price to set, they cross-reference all their decisions with their core values. What are our intentions? And if a company has the core values to be environmentally conscious, and someone offers them a really good deal on a product that is not environmentally conscious, then they're going to say, no, thank you. It's not in line with our values. And so the company has a list of core values by which they make all their decisions. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because we even go as far as expecting these companies to live in line with their values, to honor their commitment. You're not going to expect a company that doesn't have environmental awareness as one of their core values to make environmentally conscious decisions. When a company makes bad decisions in that department, they don't get crucified because they never claimed to be one that does. Again, the reason I'm bringing this up is because we're very aware of companies and organizations and churches saying, these are our core values, this is how we run our business. And yet, as individuals, we have not taken the time, the consideration, the mindfulness to write out, what are my core values? What's my vision statement? What's my mission statement? If I had a website about, myname.com, and I had an intention, a vision for myself, what would my core values be? So I really believe that this is a great time right now for all of us to just pause and write down, what are your core values? What's your vision and mission statement? And then going back to that pause between impulse and response, that pause between incoming information and our reaction to it. Instead of reacting, we take a moment, and in that pause, in that gap, we cross-reference what we're about to think, say, or do with our core values, and go, well, that person just made me really upset. Okay. What really happened is that you chose to be upset by what that person did, and now you have a choice how to respond to what happened. You know what I mean? You can't control what other people do, but you can control how you respond to what other people do. So that's why that pause is so important, and why those core values are so important, because if you don't have a reference point to go back to, well, what is the appropriate response here? Because many of us think the appropriate response is the way we've always responded, or the way we were raised. We see our parents respond in a certain situation, and then we just mimic that behavior, and we respond to it exactly the same way, until one day we realize, you know what, this isn't working for me. I need to find a new way. someone said we can define our own personal mission statement based on our values and make personal decisions from them. Yes, but many people have not contemplated what are my own values. And someone had asked me one time at an event, she said, Timber, I don't know what my core values are. Can you give them to me? And I said, no, absolutely not. I can ask you a bunch of questions, and by answering them, you will get to know yourself better. You will get to know your own uh, core values and mission better. And then you can write out a paragraph describing the kind of life you want to lead and how you want to lead it. But I can't tell you. And the reason I'm saying that is because many of us were given a mission statement and a core value from other people, our parents, teachers, preachers. We haven't necessarily taken the time ourselves to come up with a comprehensive list that says, this is how I want to behave in the world. This is the kind of mindset and perspective that I want to drive and dictate how I treat other people, for example. And so the invitation is not to follow someone else's list of values, but by all means, take what someone else has perhaps suggested and see if it resonates with you. But to simply copy and paste, so to speak, to simply say, well, I'm going to do what my parents did without pausing to think, well, what may have been true 50 years ago is not necessarily true today, is, because I think the most dangerous sentence in our language is, but we've always done things this way. Well, that's dangerous because something may have worked at some point, but may not be applicable now. And this clinging, this rigidity to always doing things exactly the same way is problematic because it won't work now. The first example that comes to mind, for example, is when we were young, we were taught in a classroom with a blackboard and a textbook, and that's how we learned. So, that worked for us 50, 40 years ago. Nowadays, with this generation being exposed to so much visual stimuli and audio and video, and sitting and staring at a blackboard is not a conducive learning practice for this generation. They'll probably get bored. They'll probably fall asleep. They need a lot more information a lot more quickly, and they absorb it very, very differently than we did. Not worse, not better, just differently. And if we insist on, no, you need to sit there, it worked for me 40 years ago, it's going to work for you. If we insist on trying to connect with them in the same way with which teachers connected with us, we're going to lose them. In fact, we're going to miss out on an opportunity of a kid really, truly embracing, the way they can learn now so much more. They're exposed to so much more information now than we were their age. I speak at high schools all the time, and I'm blown away by even the vocabulary and the conversations that I have with high school students that when I was in high school, there's no way I would have been able to have what I now would consider like an adult conversation with someone in high school. So the invitation is for all of us, especially now, is to question some of our reactions. Why am I reacting the way I am? Who modeled this behavior for me? And why am I choosing to emulate them? The power of this pause we are all given is to take inventory, contemplate, who in my life has inspired me. And I want to take a step beyond inspiration, because inspiration alone is almost some form of entertainment, if you would, whereas motivation has more of umph to it, because you're not just inspired, you're motivated to modify your own behavior to be more in line with your values, with the behavior that you've witnessed in someone else and said, that is how I want to be. When someone cuts me off on the freeway, I don't want to give them the finger. I don't want to get mad. I just want to breathe through it, let them pass, and keep going. I want to be more like that. Even though I've been one way for 30, 40 years, I want to change the way I've been, and I want to be a better version of myself with knowing what I know now. So that's the invitation. Again, guys, we are on YouTube Live, and you guys can log in. Some of you are on here. Thank you, from all over the world. And you're offering affirming words that this is helpful, that this is calming for you. I know many places of congregation are closed now, and we're all cooped up at home, and we need community. And I just want to reassure you that even though we may not be able to meet in person, I've had all of my events canceled. I was supposed to fly to Missouri this week, speak at the university and at the church out there. And of course, the university's closed. They're doing all online courses. The flight was canceled. I was supposed to speak at a yoga studio last night, and everything's been canceled, but we are not alone. We may not be able to meet in person, and maybe I'll get better at this technological YouTube way of connecting, or maybe switch to something else that works better. Again, I don't know. I just woke up this morning and thought, let's look into this and see how this works. I'm going to read some of the comments. Jenny says, it's making sense. I spent this morning contemplating my own abundance. I know I have enough. I meditated on how I can stay in a positive, mindful state to keep helping others. And that's truly the only way you can help others, is leading by example. How can you remain calm in the middle of the storm is how others can go, oh, okay, I can be more like that, because what's really stressing me out is not the storm, it's that I don't know how to handle it. And this person, they seem to be handling it pretty well. Don't push your perspective on someone else, because you can't tell someone who's stressed out to relax. I'm sure if you've ever tried that, it backfired, especially if they have no reference point of what relaxing looks like. So lead by example. Just be calm, and someone somewhere will see that and be inspired by it. Eleanor said, you are being so helpful. I am so pleased that I fell upon this live chat. Thank you. Frank said, sounds very Bruce Lee regarding Jeet Kune Do. Take what works for you and make it yours. Absolutely. And even the Dalai Lama says this about Buddhism. He said, don't take what you learn from Buddhism and try to be a Buddhist. Just use it to be a better whatever you already are. This is not about converting people to be any one way. It's about looking at all the information that's offered out there through all the different sages and whatnot in life, and looking at it like a buffet and saying, well, this looks like it would work, this looks like it would work, and making your own meal out of it. Not saying, I'm only going to have this one thing for the rest of my life because all the answers are here. I do believe every sect and every religion has something incredibly valuable to offer, but I'm hard-pressed to say that any one of them has everything to offer. Whereas I think it's there for us to derive wisdom from it at different times in our lives, and dare I say, become wise ourselves. It's not about holding someone else up and saying they did it right. It's, wow, how can I do that? My teacher said there are no enlightened beings. There's only enlightened activity. Well, that's really empowering, because the people we perceive to be enlightened, whether it be Jesus or the Buddha or the Dalai Lama or Mother Teresa, they're people like you and I. The reason we're inclined to call them enlightened is because they've made enlightened activity part of their daily lives. Well, shoot, we can do that. We can make, and so again, going back to the core values, what is enlightened activity? Enlightened activity and happiness, according to Gandhi, no less, is that it's when your thoughts, your words, and your actions are all in harmony, that they're all in alignment. And so we need to bring into alignment, who we say we are, who we think of ourselves, to who we actually act like. Does that make sense? Hope it makes sense. I'm going to keep reading. With our with how rushed our world always seems, this is also a great opportunity to reevaluate how we interact with the world. Amen. Absolutely. If ever there has been an opportunity to slow down, this is it. And I often speak at correctional facilities, and it's amazing to me how grateful many of the inmates are for being in prison, for this opportunity, as you say, to slow down. So it's we are often, in the prison of our own making. And I mean that in the sense that when I speak at prisons, many of the men feel liberated and free to redefine who they are, to take that time out, to take that pause, to figure out, what are my values? What kind of person do I want to be when I get out? Not the person I was, I am not who I was, and I am not anything that I have done. I am who I choose to become today. And so they are really taking this opportunity to embrace this new identity and define it, not be defined by something else or some outside influences, but by being the ones with the pen in their hand saying, this is the kind of person I want to be. And yet they feel free, they feel liberated to reinvent themselves, while people on the outside, when I speak outside of prisons, constantly say to me, oh, I feel stuck, or I can't help it, or, a number of excuses to their behavior. I've always been this way, or my whole family is this way. I had this one woman say, of course I'm angry, I'm Italian, as if that strips her of the responsibility to say, I may have chosen to respond with anger in my life up until this point, but I can make a different choice now. I can choose to respond differently. But first, we have to put kind of a wedge in it and say, gosh, I don't want to continue this behavior. Think of addicts. You can't tell an addict, stop. They have to get to a point where they realize stopping is more beneficial to them than continuing on. And until they get to that point, it doesn't matter how many rehabs they go to. It doesn't matter how much help you try to give them. We can only help those who are willing to help themselves. So, it's pointless to push our beliefs on someone else. It's really productive to just actually live in line with our own beliefs. I'll stop off that tangent and go back. There's someone on here. Thank you. I would love to see more live chats. I think there are gonna be more, especially now, like I said, all my events have been canceled. So not only will I do more, they won't be so impromptu. I will actually schedule them so people can log in and tune in, maybe even with questions ahead of time, so we can dive right into the questions right off the bat, as opposed to me trying to, get the gears rolling. Someone tuned in from Oxford in the UK. This is helping me a lot right now, helping me find my inner calm. Thank you, Jennifer. That's the intention, is to kind of honor that within all of us right now, yes, there may be turmoil, there may be fear, there may be anxiety, but there's also a calm, wise guru within all of us that says this too shall pass, and just kind of honor both of those voices. And when we're acting or we're speaking to someone, kind of stop and go, which part of me is speaking right now? Is it the anxious, panicked person in me, or is it the wise person in me who says, this is temporary, breathe, you'll be okay? And your definition of okay may need to change, but just kind of get to know yourself better, get to know these at least two entities that reside within you. And just like in the cover of the book, where half of me is in the dark and half of me is in the light, is bringing them together. And it's not about destroying the ego and doing away with it. It's really about honoring the coexistence of at least two entities within us, and making them coexist, if that makes sense. Someone else says, I've been working on attractions to me, and who has been inspired me in my own life. Um, I'm not sure I quite understand. It's thinking about who inspires you, and then and really honoring their message, not the messenger. So when I said, who do we want to emulate or whatnot, I definitely don't mean to imply in any way that this person you're inspired by is perfection. Don't put anyone up on a pedestal. So, just because we're all human, So whenever I quote Gandhi or Mother Teresa or the Dalai Lama, there's always a handful of people who are like, those were horrible people. Like, no, they may have done some horrible things, but that does not make them horrible people. It's this idea that if we're going to look up to someone, they have to be absolutely perfect. Perfect means a perfect combination of both the darkness and the lightness, and struggling with balancing both of them, honoring both of them, honoring the ego within and the God within, and making peace with both of them. I don't know if that makes any sense, but the only thing I wanted to highlight on that comment is worship the message, not the messenger, if that makes sense. Just hold the messenger very lightly, and honor that we're all battling very similar demons, and it's not a coincidence. I think we're battling similar challenges specifically so we can help one another through it. Let's see. I hope everyone is well and happy. So do I. Was it Freeman Griffin? I need a pad of paper to jot down these thoughts to reflect on them deeper. I will, in theory, because this is my first time trying this, in theory, this is being recorded and I will make it available as a podcast episode. If you're not familiar, there is a Buddhist Bootcamp podcast. It's available wherever you listen to podcasts. And every episode's only 5 minutes long. It's not one of those hour and a half long commitments you have to make. And even though they're only 5 minutes long, they do give you enough food for thought to carry you for the rest of the day. Just like in Buddhist Bootcamp in the book, every chapter is only a page long, and yet it gives you enough food for thought. So I always say just read one chapter a day, even though it's tempting because, it's only 1 page long. I'll just keep pushing through it. It's not about getting through it. It's about reading one and letting it marinate, letting it sit with you, and then asking, okay, does this resonate with me? And if it does, great. Try to implement what you've learned into your life and then move on to the next chapter. And if it doesn't resonate with you, then by all means, skip to the next one and read that one. And just because one may not resonate with you doesn't mean the rest won't. I don't know. It's really funny that we try to get everything out of one place. That's never going to be an option. I think it's a big, beautiful world out there, and there's so much to gain from opening ourselves up to listening, even outside our comfort zone. If you only listen to people or hang around people who are like-minded, you're not going to learn anything new. You're just going to be sitting in an echo box. You know what I mean? Like hearing yourself repeated to yourself, which is very affirming, but it doesn't at all allow for growth, just stagnation. Adnan Shubar asked, how can we keep strong while watching others suffer? I think that's a really great question, because at all times in our lives, we've been surrounded by people who are struggling, who are challenged, and we ourselves are struggling and challenged by different things. I am inclined to say that as I said in the beginning, with pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. So watching others experience pain, the pain of old age, sickness, and death, it's tough for us to watch that. It's tougher to watch people suffer in the sense that they take their pain and they make it so much worse by reacting to it, by adding to that. It's always described as there's the pain of the first arrow, and then there's the second arrow that you get shot with, that you essentially dig deeper into yourself by saying this shouldn't be happening. Why is this happening to me? Making it worse. It's how can we keep strong? By remembering that everything is temporary, by remembering that, if there's, what is it, no mud, no lotus, that some of the suffering, some of the pain that we go through in life is not only inevitable, but it is essential for our growth. The challenges, like I watch teenagers and their anxiety and all the stuff they're going through with school and whatnot. I'm like, oh, I wish I could take all that anxiety away from you and relieve you of it. But that experience is essential for their growth. If I was to take that away from them, I would be robbing them of an incredible growth opportunity. If I was to try to ease everyone's pain so no one has ever pain again, there is also not going to be any understanding. There's not going to be any compassion for someone else who's experiencing pain. So I do believe that everything is happening for us to grow from, learn from, and most importantly, move on from. So when I witness someone going through a challenging time, a difficult time, painful suffering, and any anguish, then I honor that this is something they apparently need to go through to get the nutrients they need in order to then blossom at the top through the mud as this beautiful, vibrant flower. Some of the greatest lessons I've received in life, I've been through some of the most painful experiences. So it's very easy to witness someone in pain and suffering and try to strip them away from it. But it's counterintuitive. That's not helpful for them. Helpful for them is to listen, to have compassion, to have empathy, and yet simultaneously allow and surrender to trusting this needs to go on for as long as it needs to go on, and then release and trust. And maybe that's where faith comes in. Don't know if that answers your question, but when you asked how can we keep strong while watching others suffer, I believe strength comes from within us, honoring that suffering is part of the process. It's not, and I keep using it interchangeably, but pain is part of the process. Even suffering, we suffer until we realize we don't have to suffer. That struggle is not a requirement. And then we can be in a stressful situation and choose not to be stressed. We can be in a frustrating situation and choose not to get frustrated. But we have to get through years of getting stressed and frustrated and anxious before we realize it's all a choice. You know what I mean? So when I get angry, for example, I ask myself, why am I choosing anger? There are 4,000 other emotions for me to choose from. Why am I choosing one that is so toxic to me? But first, we have to realize that it's all a choice. Feelings are not a choice. I'm going to feel anger, joy, sadness. They're going to come and they're going to go. Feelings are very temporary. In both books, I talk about the difference between feelings and emotions. But once I realize it's an option and I can choose another way to respond to the situation, it's very liberating. So I hope that helps. Darren said, great to see this live chat during a unique time. Unique time it is. Thank you for using a word like that. I said earlier, let's stop using negative adjectives like horrible and tragic, and let's start using words like interesting. And I like this, unique. Brian Collins said, how do we find a teacher to work on our mind? Oh my goodness, to work on your mind. Your mind is fully capable of knowing, what to do, and a teacher essentially helps you sort that out and point you to the teacher within. You know what I mean? Like it's a teacher's responsibility is very, very limited. They don't tell you what to do or even how to do it. They shine a light on the fact that you already have all the answers. Having said that, it is helpful to have someone or something, whether it be a book or a teacher. And so I can't tell you who to go to. Um, I will say that try different methods, different things, whether it be a life coach or a Zen master at a monastery somewhere. You don't have to become a monk, but to sit with one. You can try books, you could try podcasts. You'll glean wisdom from everyone, and some people will suggest something to you that's not going to resonate, and some will suggest something that's going to completely change your life. So keep your options open, try different things, and say, you know what, I tried life coach, it wasn't for me, and or I tried the monastery, and that definitely wasn't for me, or I tried reading this book and I really didn't like it, and yet I listened to this one audiobook and it blew my mind. So we all have something that resonates with us, and it has more to do with where we are in our lives right now. There's a common saying that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. So I don't know if you need to go look for one as much as you need to stay open to the teachings, not the teacher. And then you'll see the teachings everywhere. You will see a teacher on the freeway right next to you when someone driving erratically, and you're like, thank you for teaching me how I don't want to be. You will see a teacher in the kindness of a stranger. Teachers are everywhere. So I wouldn't necessarily say you need to look for a teacher. You need to fully embrace being a student, and then you will see a teacher in everyone you meet. I hope that helps. Right in line with exactly that. People ask me often for book recommendations and whatnot. What can I read? What can I find helpful? And right now is a great time to read. So I want to encourage you, if you go to the Buddhist Bootcamp website, there's a list of recommended books. Get them, read them. If you want to get Buddhist Bootcamp Faithfully Religionless, again, please get them autographed from the site, because every time you get one, another one is donated to the Prison Library Project. They're only $10, and it's a gift that keeps on giving. You read it, then you pass it on to someone else, and the moment you order one, another one is sent to the Prison Library Project. So I encourage you to do that. And as far as other book recommendations, there are so many. To answer your question, Brian, and so many of you, on how to do this, how to implement some of this, how to release, to let go of triggers which cause your suffering, which is an interesting question, Frank, because, what I often say, the goal is not to create an environment in which nobody pushes our buttons. It's to get to a place where we don't have any buttons that can be pushed. It's to get rid of the triggers. A really great process I would go as far as to say that this book is almost like a how-to book. Like if you read Buddhist Bootcamp and you're like, oh, this is great, but how do I actually change my habits? There's a book called Atomic Habits. If you go to the list of recommended books, it's right there at the top, which is just so well done if you want to actually structurally change your habitual tendencies, create a new pattern in life, create new neural pathways so that you change, our thoughts become our words and our words become our actions. And Buddhism definitely stresses on, let's help control your thoughts, and then your words and your actions will follow. Good luck with that. Good luck with trying to change 50 plus years of the same thought pattern. I'm sure it's great, but what I suggest is to work backwards, so to speak. If thoughts become words and words become actions, and trying to change your thoughts is just too big of an undertaking, Atomic Habits is a great way to say, okay, how do I change my actions? And then my words will follow, and then ultimately I won't even think about acting any other way. But first, if you're prone to violence, stop being physically violent. You're still going to say some violent words, and you're still going to have some violent thoughts, but you've at least nipped it, and not in the bud, but at least one step closer. Eventually, you're not going to even have violent thoughts, if that makes sense, or greedy thoughts, or fearful thoughts, whatever your challenge may be. So on this topic, if you want to read some self-help books, there's many of them on the Buddhist Bootcamp recommended reading list. If you want to read some self-help and entertaining books, for example, there's a book on there called Going Om, O-M, and it's about someone, I told you I work a lot with prisons. This guy actually ended up in a correctional facility, which you would think is a horrible, terrible thing to have happen to him, and yet it completely changed his life. Get this, for the better. So it's a wonderful story about how he knew his life was going to be changed forever. And when he got out, he didn't go right back to doing what he did before. He actually started a huge nonprofit organization that teaches inmates yoga and meditation. And actually now they actually make certified yoga instructors. And anyway, Going Om by Mike Huggins is on that list. And yes, sometimes you just want to read something light and inspirational, or not inspirational, less heady stuff. You just want to read something that's lighthearted and enjoyable. And I would say Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine is a wonderful book. I really enjoyed it. I just read it from beginning to end on vacation, and it was just so enjoyable, so witty, so funny. So if you want to get out of your head and just read something wonderful, Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine is a wonderful book. If you want to read again something heavier but still enjoyable, Just Mercy is not just a wonderful book. It's now also a wonderful movie. And I can keep going all day. I read a book, at least a book a week. But I'll finish with this. There is a book called Comedy, Sex, God. It's also on the list of recommended books. And the reason I recommend it, and in fact, I will go as far as to say that I recommend the audio version of it, because the book is written by a stand-up comedian, right? So his delivery is half the battle. And I want to share a portion with you from the book, Comedy, Sex, God, that ties in also on what we talked about earlier today. And then I'm going to wrap this up because we've been talking for an hour. And I will schedule this again for a future date. Instead of doing an impromptu live Q&A, I'll schedule it. So check out the Buddhist Bootcamp list of upcoming events on Facebook and on the website, and I will include a live broadcast event. But I want to leave you with this. We talked earlier about admiring the teachings, not the teacher, about distinguishing between the two, about being inspired by different people, about emulating other people. Now, I want to read you this excerpt from Comedy, Sex, God that I found absolutely wonderful, and perhaps leave it with that. He says, "I know nothing about sports, but let me try this. Imagine Jesus as a receiver in a football game. You know, there's that kick thing in the beginning where one team kicks the ball really, really hard because they lost a coin toss or something, and the other team has to run the ball back. Well, Jesus of Nazareth, number 33, catches the ball on his own second yard line, and it looks like it's going to end right away. It looks like sweet Jesus is just going to get tackled, and his team will have to start from there. But that's not what happens. Sweet Jesus of Nazareth runs the pigskin all the way to midfield, jumping, spinning. He's doing backflips. No one's ever seen anything like this before. It's amazing. Until somewhere around the 25-yard line, Jesus gets tackled and the ball slips out of his hands into the air. Fumble, right? Except the ball soars into the hands of one of his teammates. And it's you. You are on the field. Now, sweet Jesus is yelling at you, go, go, and the crowd roars with excitement. Run, run, bring it home, baby. Let's see how far we can take this. But you just put the ball down so you can clap and cheer and celebrate his incredible return. Dude, you're supposed to run with the ball. Yes, worship and celebrate, but get on with it. He has shown you the plays. You saw how he moved. But so many of us are still standing around talking about how well he did it instead of getting a move on. So don't just celebrate his ascension. Get to ascending yourself. Go and do likewise. And people say, oh, but you're God. And he says, I know I am, but what are you? I love this excerpt. I love this perspective. And because I've always said in my books and in my public talks, this is not about being a Buddhist. This is not about being Christian. It's about being Christ-like. It's about being Buddha-like. You know, it's not what would Jesus do or what would the Buddha do. It's what would the best version of you do. Be that. And d- don't just repeat old behavior patterns thinking that you are imprisoned to them. We can create new ones. And I would go as far as to say this is a wonderful time to do exactly that. Take inventory of what's important to you, write down your core values, listen to some podcasts, read some books, and be kind to one another. Namaste.